I just want to welcome everyone to our fifth webinar in our community learning series. My name is Courtney Castle, and I'm our Communications and Marketing Manager here at CDSS. And very excited to be with you all tonight discussing building our social networks and some of the challenges that we have as adults in supporting our family members when we're trying to make social connections and build relationships. So we'll be diving a little deeper into that topic this evening. But I did want to let everyone know that tonight's webinar will be recorded, and you will, if you couldn't make it this evening, you'll be watching this recording tomorrow, and we share it via email. But I'd like to introduce Laura Lachance, our Executive Director, who has a few words to say before we get started.
Good evening here in Ontario. It looks awfully dark outside. It is. I'd just like to say hi to everybody and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm going to read a land acknowledgement. And I'm going to begin with this because although we are meeting virtually, we're all on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people for thousands of years. And the First Nations have walked on these lands for over 15,000 years. And we call it home. They called it home too, and shared a tradition of telling great stories. While our address is on the ancestral land of the Métis and the Blackfoot, we work from regions of the Mohawk, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and I'm speaking to you from Collingwood, Ontario, the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. Here, many others cared for their families and communities the way we now seek to care for others. We seek to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community across Canada. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Laura. And as we dive in, this is a topic we've actually been talking about all fall and throughout Canadian Down Syndrome Week. We've been discussing social isolation and friendships and the challenge that adults with Down syndrome have with making those connections sometimes. So to start things out, I would like to introduce our first speaker this evening, Anna Bruno, who's an independent facilitator at Partners for Planning. Welcome, Anna.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here tonight. I'm going to share my screen and go through some slides that I presented, but I hope that we can have a little bit of conversation. So please feel free to raise a hand or pop something into the chat if you'd like to ask a question or offer a comment that we can engage a little bit deeper in. And I apologize. The first few of my slides are a little bit theoretical, but I wanted to give you some background about why I think the way I do and how we can, there we go, work at building relationships from this framework. But then I hope to get into the meat and some good quality examples of how these things work in practice. So give me one moment to put that up there for you. Can you see my screen okay? Are you seeing it in presenter view?
Presenter.
I'm sorry, let me change that. I want to make it big for everyone. There we go. That's better, okay. I hope. Yeah. Great. So, in my experience, and I think we can all appreciate this, the fact that relationships really don't just happen. We do have to work at them. We have to put some intentional effort into building relationships and sustaining them over time, and that does take. It takes work. It takes practice. It takes energy, and I do think it also takes a little bit of magic. We have to believe that sometimes they're just the right person that we connect with, and we have that spark with, and we have to look out for those people, and sometimes that takes kind of an openness and an ongoing commitment to thinking about relationship in everything we do. But there are strategies that we can use to create opportunities where relationships can flourish. And that's, I'm going to talk about one strategy tonight, one way of thinking tonight that might help with thinking about relationships that will then become part of that broader network or a circle of support that you might be looking to build. And that's this way of thinking is about thinking about the roles that we hold. And I just want to open it up for you to think about, either type in the chat or put up your hand if you feel comfortable. What's a role that you are proud of? And in addition to that, what's a role that your child, your adult loved one might also be proud of in their life? Just pause to have you think through that a little bit. And as you're thinking about it and perhaps wanting to share around that, you know, remember that our roles, um, for example, I hold the role of mom. I have three children, and that fills my life with a whole lot of things. Because I also hold the role of hockey, carpool mom. I hold the role of um, uh, school volunteer, um, many things that are connected to the life of my children, and hold the role, an important role for me of the work that I do. Sourdough baker, cookie maker, those are things that I love, and they fill my life with lots of opportunity. I can't see the chat, but if you have posted something in there, thanks for sharing. Um, Keep those ideas of those roles in your mind, and maybe perhaps if you're stuck or having trouble thinking about some of them, it might kind of come to you as we go through this a little more. And this is the theory part that I promise I'll move quickly through so we can get to the good stuff. But this idea of thinking about roles comes from a man named Wolf Wolfensberger, and many of the families that have um, kind of mentored me in my work had a strong belief in the work of Wolf Wolfensberger and this idea of social role valorization. The idea being that when we hold valued social roles, we're much more likely to be connected to the good things in life. And for me, the good things in life are very much about relationship. And so social role valorization is a way to be connected to more deeply in relationship. And the families that I have been connected to over the years have instilled this in me because this was something that they practiced in their life, and have taught this framework to me. So how does this work? If we can understand that people with disabilities get stuck in socially devalued roles that sort of limit their possibility and experience, we can imagine that by developing socially valued roles, we have a starting place to think about people's capacity. Um, and as I said, this is kind of one way of viewing a pathway to kind of building more relationships and connections that will lead to broadening our network of support. So where do we build these roles? Where do these roles come from? I think they begin in home and neighborhood. They begin in our family life. As I mentioned, I'm a mom and an adult daughter and a sister and an aunt, and all of those, and a friend and a neighbor, and all of those roles play a big part of my life. As for many of us, that they do. And by even starting with this space of home and neighborhood, we can see lots of potential for connections to form. Obviously, though, there are other places where we build roles within our friends and family, within our work, within our learning, perhaps our community connections, sports and leisure, and if our spiritual or religious beliefs, if that is important to us. All of these things might be more important to us at some point in our life than others, and that's okay. And we might want to develop or think about roles in different areas at different times, depending on where we are. And I just wanted to note that this work comes from a wonderful thought leader in this space, John O'Brien. So I'm crediting him for the thinking that he brought or is bringing to us today. Um, one important thing when we think about our roles is that they're much deeper than just activities. Activities is the things that we do. But roles are about who we are, the things that we have become, the life that we live. And roles, when they're firmly established, give us place and purpose in our society. And the bigger the role, I think the more that people regard us in a particular light that allows us to have deeper relationships. Um, and so I'm going to get into thinking about, okay, so how do we move from like just doing activities? How do we move from just being in this space, doing things, to being something, to being those things that we care about? So if you can, you had thought about roles earlier, perhaps take a step further and think more deeply about the roles your loved one plays. If you have a piece of paper beside you, jot them down. And you could maybe some of these roles that you're writing down, you're thinking, oh, well, they're not really strongly developed. I wouldn't say that that my loved one or myself really fulfills this yet. But I think even the idea of a role that you might hold gives us an opportunity to think about how we can grow them, what we can do to make them stronger and help us build more connection. So for example, if you are a neighbor, um, but you don't really do much as a neighbor. You don't really connect with your neighbors or see them or interact with them. Maybe it's a role that you hold, but it's not a strong one. But hey, there's an opportunity there to think about how we could grow that role. Or if you are a daughter or a sibling or an aunt or uncle, um, how are you living out those roles, and what could we do to grow those? And outside of then our family and our neighborhood, you know um, what are the things that we're particularly interested in, and where are our passions? So are we a swimmer? Are we an artist? Are we um, uh, a video gamer? And all of those roles are important too, because they lead to the potential for further connection, based on interest. So take a moment to think about those things, and we'll walk through how we strengthen those particular roles. So roles are really, we look at them as based on interest, that they're typical and valued for people of our age and stage in life, um, recognizable and familiar, and they have an opportunity to offer contribution. And I just want to touch on a few points here. So when I talk about typical and valued, I think we live in a time where people's interests, those things that we're passionate about, are so much broader. And you can really find people who also share these, particular interests that we have, in a much easier way than we used to be, because we're now connected through different kinds of media and more globally, and pretty much look for any interest that one might have, and you can discover a group or connection connected to that particular interest. So if you are a Harry Potter fan, or my roles are really limited, or like I said, a sourdough bread maker. I think there are places and spaces where we can connect based on my interest that's typical and valued, and has become much more recognizable and familiar over time than it ever has been. Um, and this last piece, though, is the part that can be a little bit tricky. So we might have interests that we participate in. We go to do something, or we bake bread for ourselves, let's say. But where is that space where we can use our passions, our interests to create a role that offers contribution? And that opportunity to create a role that offers contribution, that's the key, I think, for building relationship. And it might just be in a social setting. Our contribution is supporting one another, enjoying company with one another. But also, we can imagine that our contribution might be in the care or support of one another. For instance, I can bake bread for myself, but when I begin to think about my sourdough bread baking as an opportunity to connect with others, to bring a loaf to my neighbor, to begin a conversation, to bring a loaf to a friend and help them develop their own interest and passion in sourdough bread making, well, then we have an opportunity to share our gift, to offer contribution to others, and people begin to see us in a different light. And in that way in which we see one another in a different way, where we're offering contribution, I think that's where the spark of friendship happens, because it allows us to have in a much more mutual type relationship. So when we think about roles for ourselves or for our loved ones, we're trying to think about putting our energy and effort into figuring out how to deepen these roles based on interests that are typical and valued, are recognizable and familiar, and offer an opportunity for contribution. Um, Through the work of Janet Cleese, who I greatly admire, she talks about building a context for relationship. So Janet, will say we can't force relationship to happen, but we can set up the circumstances where relationships have an opportunity to flourish. And we need to think about four pillars that she talks about. So we need to think about what our role is in a particular place, who the people are who are going to be there. Where is that place? Is it rooted in our community? And do we have a presence in there? And so when we think about, if we're really focused, if we're really committed to thinking about relationship, then are we considering all these pieces? So, for example, someone who might love yoga. So, based on interest, at the bottom here, it's all rooted in our interest. Or a person who loves yoga. So there's a role in there as a yogi. We're a yogi. We might go somewhere and practice yoga. Are we going to a place where we know that there's people we might have the potential to connect with? Or are we doing yoga online and not really doing it for ourselves and our own health and well-being, and that's wonderful. But if our focus is on relationship, are we going to a place that's like in our local community that we will see people that we can be friendly with, and where we might even begin to have a role? And what can a role be in a group social yoga studio? Well, maybe we get there a little bit early, and help set up the mats, or chat with the instructor around the music, or light the candle if that's what our studio does. What are the things that we can be doing in that space that might be a contribution and people see us in a valued way? Or we're right up at the front and lead that a little bit, you know? And how can through our continued and consistent presence, are we there to chat a few minutes early with the other participants who come to the same yoga studio that we are, so we can be known in that place, so that when we're not there, we're missed, right? Which is an important part of having a role. You have a role, or you have a presence in a space when, people miss you when you're not there. And I think these are the kinds of kind of connections, or opportunities that have a better chance at bringing relationship. It's not a guarantee, but when we're present and consistent in places that are in our communities, based on our personal interests, we're setting the conditions for the magic to happen, for maybe the right person to see us in a new way, and develop a relationship. Um, so this is where we get practical, I guess. I'm hoping we can have a little bit more conversation. I've given you that theory, that the kind of the thinking that's behind this. Well, where do we begin with this? I think it's important for us to begin to think about our own interests, perhaps, or the interests of our loved ones, and just begin to try things. So I know lots of families that I have met and I've connected with have said, "Well, I'm not sure yet what my loved one's interests really are, or I haven't really figured that out yet, where their passion lies." And this is an opportunity, when that is the case, to try a whole lot of things, and be open to the fact that some things might not work out. That there's lots of times where we try something, um, and it doesn't quite work the way we want to. And it's time to reevaluate. Was it the conditions that made it not work out so great? Or is it our loved ones saying that this is not something they really are passionate about or want to do? I have a good friend who I'm part of her circle of support, who we're in a new discovery process as well. She, um, I think, like many people post pandemic, lost a lot of the things that she cared about and the places where she spent time. And so her circle now has been trying to think through some new opportunities. And my friend is really good at quietly saying she's not interested in stuff. Um, she will generally say yes to almost anything. But you kind of know when she doesn't really like it after the first time. And uh, which is, I think, a wonderful way to be, because she's willing to try a bunch of stuff. And then when people are really listening, can tell you that, okay, it wasn't my favorite thing. So next week, she's trying out for the first time, with a friend, a fitness studio that's really looking at body positive fitness studio, and she's going to give that a go. And we've only purchased a few passes, so that we're not committed to a lifelong membership at this body positive fitness space, but we're going to give it a shot and see. And we're also thinking about, um, what she really likes to do is to greet people and to meet new people everywhere she goes. And so one of the things we thought, and she agreed that she might like to do, is canvass door to door with a political party. She she really doesn't care what the political party is so much as the opportunity to go door to door and meet some new folks. And with the right people, she could be really motivated and might be swung to be part of any party that promises her the opportunity to meet some new people. Um, so those are just a few examples of the things we're trying. We have no idea if they're going to work or if they're going to flop, but we're giving it a shot. And the reason that we're giving it a shot is because we think both places have the opportunity for building relationship. She can do a lot of things where there's no opportunity for relationship. If we wanted to work on fitness, she has a trainer. They spend time together and they work on fitness, just the two of them, and that's fine. That's good. That's wonderful and healthy for her body. But if we're thinking about places to be where she can work on, where she can be active and fit, but also think about relationship, the body positive fitness is, for example, one of those such things. So then we try a bunch of things, we see how they go, we're okay with the failure, we keep trying. The other thing is to have a mindset of appreciating and noticing people's roles and what they can grow into. Um, so for example, I talked about, even in our home, what can people be doing that might lead to greater contribution? Could could someone be taking on particular roles in the home or family, even starting really simply in that space, where they're creating the family meal and going shopping for that family meal, which means they're going out to the market every week to pick up the things they need to make that family meal, and inviting people to one's home to have that meal together and strengthening some relationships. And if that's something that your loved one particularly likes to do, likes to cook, likes to shop, or likes to welcome people in a role of hospitality, um, can we begin to appreciate and notice and how we could put some support in to make those things happen? Um, the next tip I have is thinking about making space for the typical. So what do our loved ones at the age and stage of life that they're at, what would be happening normally for someone at that point in their life? And try to create room for that. Um, you know, I have a friend who's now in her 40s and whose mom is now experiencing her own health issues. And so it is pretty typical for a 40-year-old woman who has a mom who's experiencing health issues to begin to take on the role of adult daughter and be particularly supportive to their mom. And so how can we begin to shape those roles and think about how people um, can make a contribution in ways that we hadn't thought about their contribution before, with support, if that's needed. In my friend's case, it's definitely needed, but it gives her the opportunity to um, do things for her mom that might then really lead to other connections because she's out and about, taking her mom to various things, and there's opportunity for relationship there. Um, Through all this, a tip to remember, a thing to think about, is the idea of prioritizing relationships. And so what I mean by this is that the example that I gave of my friend and her fitness, we can practice fitness and do something that was good for our bodies in our homes with no connection or relationship with anybody else, right? It can happen just for us. And that's good. But if our priority is relationship, or if we're focused on building relationship, then we have to begin to think about how can we do this particular thing or a different particular thing where we're out in places where we have the potential to build relationship. And that too is a mindset shift. It's intentionally making the effort to go. Um, in this day and age, for example, of like online shopping, we can be very good at staying home and not leaving our house, which is difficult when we're trying to think about making relationships. But how do we even begin to prioritize relationship by getting out of our house regularly into the places in our community where we can say hello and greet people and be present in spaces and where people can see us. And those are, you know, simple shifts that we can begin to make, and we don't know where they'll take us, but they have an opportunity at least where we can be connected to others. And so that leads us obviously to being open to possibility, and thinking about what's possible for our loved ones. Um, and sometimes as a circle member, I know that I have also sometimes not been open to the possibilities for my friend that she might want for her own life, and have not seen her in the potential to make relationships. I've been, definitely guilty of that. I can vividly remember a time we were out for lunch one day, and I didn't know all the wonderful connections that she had. And we were sitting across the table sitting across the hall in a restaurant from two kind of businessmen who were chatting and seemed deep in conversation. And my good friend was sort of waving to them and smiling and wanted to go over and say hello. And I was kind of mortified. I'm like, oh, they're having a meeting. It's not time for us to do that. And um, wanting to shield her from what I thought might be an embarrassing situation, right? Little do I know, of course, that this friend of mine had met these gentlemen before, went into their shop on a frequent and regular basis, and they knew her very well and were more than happy to chat and connect with her and share business cards and talk when she walked over. And I hadn't been open to the possibility that these were the friends that she made. And that was years ago, and since then I know that my friend knows everybody at the corner of her of her neighborhood, and that had I taken the time to really pay attention and understand the deep-rooted relationships that she's formed on her own, um, uh, that I would have been more open to seeing the potential and the possibility that it could have happened just even in that restaurant. And so I think sometimes we do this, we do this sometimes to shield or protect our loved ones. Um, and we do this with particular interests that people have, or how can those particular interests be a passion or a thing that could build a role that we could build or dream upon. We can limit people even when we're not meaning to. Um, and so this is just a reminder to kind of be open to possibility. And that leads me to my last point on this slide, at least, is the idea of letting your loved one take the lead. Um, and again, thinking about my good friend, she very much has the opportunity to take the lead in her super quiet way. She often is not the one to say, "This is something I want to do," and be able to vocalize that and lead us there. But when we are thoughtful about offering opportunities, she can let us know in her own way whether this is a possibility or not. Um, and when we take the time to really listen to her, um, we know what's going to be something that she wants to commit to, something that she wants to pursue. Yes, we have to offer the opportunities. We have to be creative and help her think through all the different things that might be possible in her community and in her neighborhood, and that's great. But she will be the one in the end to tell us this is something, yes, that I'm interested in keep continuing to pursue. I want to keep doing this, and we have to let her take the lead, because if we're thinking back to those slides before about what roles are, they have to be based on interest, strong interest that people hold, and genuine interest that they have. Um, and we can only get to that when we let our loved one take the lead. I just want to point out, some pitfalls or barriers that I've seen kind of uh, prevent people from having the relationships that they really desire. And it can be something as simple as transportation. I put that. I know it might seem silly, but these are things that prevent people from being part of things, getting there. Uh, you know, um, Depending on the communities we live in Ontario, I know that transportation can be a major issue. And even in a city, I'm in Markham, but my friend that I'm talking about lives in Toronto, and even in a city like Toronto, getting around can be a major issue. And so these are the things that we as family members, as circle members, can really help think through to make sure that people can have opportunities. Um, and whether that's helping with a ride, helping people learn to use transit when that's available, or having the support to get places, that's really important. Um, And just thinking about in relationship, how that can be helpful. So, a small example around that. Um, a good friend of mine wants to go and spend time with another friend who lives in the city. Um, but where the holdup is in that connection, in that relationship, is getting there. And that this friend that they're going to visit, um, is happy to visit, happy to spend time together, but isn't able to be the one to drive back and forth, to drive home. And so we can make relationships happen. We can create opportunity when we figure out the details that are holding people back from making things easy. So a simple example, but something that's not to be overlooked. Another thing that I think that sometimes prevents people from having time to think about and creating relationship is the idea of overscheduling. When our lives are full of programs and things to do and places to be, we're not leaving room for flexibility and spontaneity. And I don't mean that I think that people should be home doing nothing all day. I definitely don't believe that. But I believe that they're, having some flexibility and some time to meet up with friends, to try something new, um, to do some things that they love can make an impact, right? If we can think about even just one day where we're not kind of in a program, and how can we spend that day in a way that's flexible and spontaneous, um, that might offer the opportunity to create some more relationships. And then, of course, this is always the dilemma, I think, about considering what kind of support is needed. And we have to consider this, we always have to be rethinking this, thinking on an individual basis about how much support someone needs to do something in this particular space for this particular activity or role that they're kind of undertaking. Um, and that's going to be super individual to your loved one, and you have to kind of think through that or find some people to help you think through that. But pausing to think about that so that we can make room for relationship to happen is really important. I knew an individual who I knew a person who had a lot of support around them all the time. And um, because of that, it made it really difficult to just know the people in his building, and just begin to himself get to know the people at the store he frequented, because people will inevitably talk to the supporter and not the individual themselves. And so figuring out when support can back away or be kind of off in the sidelines, we don't want to forget the very, very important role that supporters play. But supporters, and I mean that even as, paid support, but unpaid support too, moms and dads and siblings and friends. Do we hover or do we give space for people to make their own relationships? In the case of my friend I was telling you about, do we make the space to allow her to explore her community and be out and present and making her own relationships. So just pausing to think about that. And then lastly, and I think this is all related then, our comfort with risk. Um, Certainly trying new things is scary. Exploring new opportunities can be frightening. And how can we develop a level of comfort with particular risks about exploring and trying things and maybe being disappointed. And I know that that's tricky and easy for me to say on the other end, um, but a reminder to think about it. What's a little step that we're willing to take to allow some good thing to come into our loved one's life, if we have, but the piece of risk that we can navigate. And we might need people to talk about this with. This is where I think, building a network of support and having some people that you can confide in and trust. How do we bridge this? How do we figure this out? How do we create some safeguards? You know, uh, for instance, I'll share one more story about this friend of mine. She very much loves to hang out in the bars in her neighborhood. And that is something for sure that comes with a level of risk. She wants to do those things mostly alone, so that she has the freedom um, to sit with people and have a beer and hang out with the bartenders at the bar. And while um, obviously we want to support her in that, and for example, she loves to watch the Leafs game, doesn't want to watch Leaf games at home in her house, wants to watch them at a bar with other people, because that's where real sports fans go to watch a game if they don't have tickets. So, and tickets are to a Leaf game right now is not cheap. And so how do we set the conditions to make that possible, where she can go to the local bar, the same bar that she goes to each and every week, to make that happen? And we've worked with the bartenders there. Her support workers have made connections with the bartenders there, to help them understand a little bit about my friend, and make space and room for her there. And that we know that if there was anything that was really going wrong, that they at least had a contact, someone they could reach out to, if something went sideways one night. And that part of kind of safeguarding this thing to make it supportive for my friend to feel comfortable to go at night on her own to a bar, was super important for our circle to spend the time to do. And sure, there's a little bit of risk still in that. We know that. But it's what she really wants for her life. And it's where she's made some pretty interesting connections, actually, that have been sustained. And it's just taken a little bit of massaging that relationship with the local bars and helping make sure that happen. That's allowed it to kind of flourish and continue to grow. So I want to leave you with, some potential sources of support and thinking about this. And there are lots. And I don't know how many of you have connected to the Planning Network. Um, but the Planning Network is full of videos and resource guides and tools around relationship building and how other people have done it, inspired by the work of other families who have kind of walked this journey first. There's a video here that I like to share, of Andrew Werner, crafting a good life, and his family really thought through how Andrew could have a really good life in his community, and build relationship and based on roles and interests. So kind of like, if you want to see this, how this idea of thinking in roles kind of looks in practice, I encourage you to go and check out Andrew's video, because it will give you some real tangible ideas. I think I think we need the inspiration of others to see how it can work for our loved one. We need to see other people trying and doing, because that gives us the hope that we might have, the ability to do that too, and the encouragement. Like, this work is hard. This work of building relationships is not easy, and we need the support, of other folks around us, to kind of keep motivating us to keep going. So for people who are looking for some of those tools, some of that practical support, and some inspiration, the Planning Network is one good thing. And I think what you're doing here tonight is also another great resource, a great tool, coming together to talk through these things, to share our thoughts together, to be a source of inspiration for one another. We're always at Partnership Planning talking about the value and importance of family networks, because they give us that source of inspiration and support. And for our loved ones, beyond family networks, thinking about places where they might contribute as a self-advocate, I think that's also an incredible place for people to make connections and to see the possibility they have for their life. So connecting to your local, People's First chapter, would be another great opportunity for people to, begin to see their capacity and their possibility. So you can find all that stuff at planningnetwork.ca if you're looking for some of those tools. But I'm more interested to see if we want to have a little bit of a conversation, if there's anything that's popped up for people. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. A lot of what you said actually resonated with me and left me with a lot to think about in terms of roles. And I think a lot of great examples about opportunities that we can kind of find in our own lives and in our loved ones' lives. I think there's also kind of a thought that came to me, is that there are also, although it seems kind of like, well, where do I find these new friends? Like, where do we make these new connections? But I started thinking about our own community a little bit, and that there are like organizations and businesses and other people out there who also value community and want to try to foster it. And your yoga example specifically, I know there's a yoga studio here that does an exchange, so that you not only go to the studio to do classes, but you can volunteer there and get to know the other staff and the other participants in exchange for some classes, because they're trying to cultivate that community since. So I think
Yes.
that's encouraging, if nothing else.
Yes, exactly. And that's how like the being present as a participant can grow into a role more deeply. That's a wonderful example. And my studio does the same actually. It's an energy exchange, they call it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that we've seen through talking to community members some really creative examples. And I think you're referencing like the post-COVID kind of hunger everyone has for in-person connection. I know there's another actual local kind of cafe game shop locally who have set up like a complete kind of cafe area, and you don't need to purchase anything to use it. You can just come at any time when they're open, and really just trying to make it like an open community space. So I thought that was also a really, really interesting idea. But
Fantastic.
I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts, or we also have our community panel this evening, so we can, I'm sure there'll be some discussion as we move into that. So I think for time's sake, I think we'll move into our community guests, and we'll introduce our first guest of the evening, Wendy Newbery, who's here with us. Chat a little bit more about your own experience with building these social relationships as a mom. Welcome, Wendy.
Thanks, Courtney. This is one of my favorite topics. I think it's one of my favorite topics because our family has really learned a lot through helping our daughter to build her network of supportive friends. And we've also seen her really grow within that community because she feels so comfortable with those people. So I'll just give you a little overview. Courtney, I don't know what your time frame is, but I'm aiming for what, 5 minutes or something?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Wendy, you go ahead
Okay.
and you tell us a bit about your story. We've got until 8 o'clock, so we've got lots of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so our daughter, her name is Evie. Evie is 32. She's someone for whom relationship building doesn't necessarily come naturally in some traditional ways, but she's very keen to have relationships. But she well, let's just say she's not comfortable with everybody. So and she didn't go to school full time throughout her whole life. She was there part time. But that's because she didn't like the group stuff and the noise and the busy school setting. So we were a little concerned about what that meant for life after school. And in the middle of her high school years, we hired a community connector through an organization called Planned Lifetime Networks in our community, which is Kitchener, Ontario. And our community connector happened to be somebody that we'd already known, who was a neighbor, and just eventually became an independent facilitator and is our independent facilitator now. But she really invested in getting to know Evie well, and I think Evie really valued her support as well as the support of her dad and myself and her sister. So we all kind of shared in the conversations around where were the connections that were meaningful for her, and what kinds of friendships did she want to have, did she like having. And it's true that if you have that lens, and it was really helpful for us to have the community connector as somebody outside our family, because her perspective, she picked up on things that we wouldn't have necessarily. So I've always really valued having that kind of that ally who's not kind of enmeshed within the family system. So Evie's network came together right about the time when she was leaving high school. And it was perfect for us because we felt like you know, she's leaving high school, but she's kind of graduating to community. And this network is her little community that's going to help her connect to a bigger community. So at that time in her network, just to start off, she identified a neighbor, two cousins, an elementary school teacher, and an aunt as people she wanted in her network. And so with the help of her community connector, who did the ask with those people, Evie was able to bring those folks into her network. And because she is an Anna Green Gables fan, big time, she called them her kindred spirits. So Evie's Kindred Spirits Network has been going now for 12 years. And right now it has 14 people in the group. It's been very interesting kind of how that has flowed. And I think networks, our network, the people who joined the network for Evie intentionally committed to her and to their friendship and their relationship. So it felt really secure and solid for all of us. We trusted those people and they trusted us. And it provided like almost like a little microcosm of the big world. So Evie could develop roles within that group that she may not have had before, or that developed because somebody in the group invited her to try something new. And so there was a lot of personal growth from her within that little community. Evie, it's really important for Evie to make contributions as well as be the receiver. And so in that setting as well, she could be the hostess, or she could be the comforter, or she could be the one who planted bulbs in somebody's garden to help them, or fed their cats when they were away, or, you know, so there was lots of opportunity, not just for her to get really good support from those friends, but for her to be a very active contributor to their lives. And so many times when we talk about bringing intentional networks like this together, people think that it is that there's an individual at the center who's going to be receiving, but it becomes very much a web, I think, as those relationships develop. And whoever is at the center changes, because, you know, one day it's someone in the network who's had a health issue that we're all surrounding them and you know, trying to provide support for. You know, the next week it's you know, somebody's husband's not well, or somebody's really afraid about some big new step they're going to take in their life. So I feel like the relationships have developed to a point where we all kind of feel like we have each other's back, and we're there because of Evie. So some of the things that have grown out of this network are Evie's book club. So because she's a reader, she had said to her facilitator, she wanted to have a book club. And so now she has developed a book club that's on Zoom about once every 6 weeks. And she just decides, you know, this week or next month, we're going to read about friendships, or next month, we're going to read a poem, our favorite poems. So it's very loose. It's 45 minutes. It's a chance for people to just come in, and mostly it is her network, but that now there are people coming from outside her network, some peers, a couple of former teachers have joined. We've got neighbors. There's just such a nice grouping of people. And I think the kindred spirits really have fostered a lot of confidence in Evie and helped her to grow into the woman that she is today, which has opened a lot of doors for her. So it's been just a central part of our lives. And as the network grows and changes, somebody moves away, somebody dies. Evie will work with her facilitator to bring somebody new into the network if there's a space for someone. So it's evolving and changing, but I have a lot of faith that it will continue.
What a really, really great example of how, you said 12 years now it's been going on with this network. And I think that's such a great example of how when you let Evie lead, she picked these people, and that's, this is the amazing thing that's grown from that. And like, yes, it's taken time, but I think that's certainly a great example of like where, if you start today with establishing this network, that's where, it could lead. So thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we also have with us this evening the Innes family. Thank you very much for joining us. We have Ashley and her parents, Jay and Lynn, with us tonight. Welcome.
Hello there.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us to chat a bit more about making friends, finding relationships. It's not always easy, is it?
No. Kind of hard topic to kind of hot topic again.
For sure, for sure. Well, Ash, why don't you start by just telling us a bit about yourself, if you don't mind?
Okay. My name is Ashley. I'm 24, almost 25. Coming soon. And my favorite color is orange. I love orange. What?
Do you want to tell them a little bit about what your week looks like, what you do on Mondays?
I just know you want me to.
I think it's a good example of different things that you do and different things you've tried.
You need to stay on a topic, you know.
This is the topic. This is your network that you're helping to create.
My parents is going off topic on me, you know.
Tell them what you do on Mondays.
On Mondays, I go to I think it's called a dragonfly. Dragonfly is also a big community, I want to say.
Community, yeah.
For learners with Down
For
syndrome.
learners, for Down syndrome. And I always we do art program. Sometimes I go on Fridays, sometimes I don't. We never know.
And you do a fair bit of walking in that program.
Oh yeah, we do a lot of walking. It's really good for our body. It's kind of fun. It's good for your health and it's good for your heart.
Yeah.
To make it stronger.
And then Tuesdays. What are your Tuesdays?
Tuesday, I go to I go to a dance company. It's called The Loft, and I dance with my let's go. I do have friends that I know like really long time, and they are still my friends, Lord.
And how long have you been with that dance company?
20
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. That's a long time to be dancing.
Yeah, when I started dancing at the age of 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
What
Do you put on? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Do you put on shows? Like, do you
Yes,
have-
we
yeah.
do. Yeah, we do. We always do it. I think kind of at the end of the year, so.
And what do you do on Tuesday mornings?
Tuesday morning, I do have a full-time job. I'm also working out right now. It's called a physio, a clinic.
Physio clinic, yeah.
It's cooked by a cop. I live in Cobb now. It's good for me for walking them both ways and back. It's good for your heartbeat, I guess.
And what do you do at physio?
I do lots of cleaning, doing laundry, and I'm really good at folding laundry. Yeah, I'm at work. Sometimes I don't do it at home. I do have a problem with it.
And just to talk about a little bit about how that job came about, during COVID, prior to COVID, Ashley had been volunteering at a long-term care home where I work. And then during COVID, an opportunity came up in order to support the human resources challenges within the hospital, West End Hospital. And so a hospital support aid program was launched to entice high school students and a little bit older to join the workforce and help out. Ashley was accepted and went through orientation and was working, and they loved her and she loved it. Unfortunately, the program ended in April of 2023, and the funding wasn't continued. So that was a missed opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
But she was we were promoting her work on social media, and so when that job ended, we sort of told the world about it on social media. And that's when the physiotherapy clinic here in the West End of Ottawa saw the opening, and they contacted us directly and helped to create an opportunity for Ashley. And she's been there for probably 8 months or so, 2 mornings a week.
Yes.
And
Actually, not every week. They did change my hours. I used to work in the evenings. Now I'm working at 9 to 11 in the morning now.
And we have a job coach who's helped Ashley through all these various transitions, and that's helped to coordinate things, to break down duties, to make them manageable, to support with engagement with the employer on feedback, and she's been amazing, and we couldn't have done it without her, for sure.
Yes, and I used to volunteer at a potted food bank, and some people don't have food. We always we have I think the top 5 subs came in and cook for us. It's really cool. Remember?
Yep. So Ashley's had quite a few volunteer opportunities in order to expand her network. She's indicated to us she enjoys working with adults, and especially older adults.
Yes.
It's been very good for her. So she volunteers as well at a long-term care home. She just came back in from doing a day there. And what do you do when you're at the Pearly?
I always do bingo, and I used to do the ice cream parlor too. That I cannot really eat because I cannot have it in the way. And I do bingo every Thursday. And every Sunday, I always do volunteer at the match, and I have to do I think they ordering people.
Ordering people.
And I'm really good. Sometimes I'm sort of good, sort of not that great, you know.
Right, Mom's gonna say something.
I think, as you can see, Ashley's tried a lot of things. And I think like with the physio clinic, we really got to experience how much Ashley valued being in the community. And in that job, the people she sees, people she knows, the people she gets to know, that's been a great thing. And then I think in the dance company that she's at, meeting people who are just embrace Ashley and the gifts that she and her friends bring. So she has a couple of friends that she's gone to high school with and is known, and 2 of them are out of high school. So that was a bit of a change, that they're not going to be together every day. And this dance teacher at the loft, the owner, she said, well, they do 2 classes on 2 separate nights. Why don't we change it around and have it on one night, but have an hour in between? And that's really created that extra time for these young ladies to sit and chat about their day or whatever. So, doing the activity, but creating that added, time for that social connection for them to keep building as well. And they're coming for a sleepover this week.
And I used to dance at my old. I used to dance at my old dance company. I used to dance at. It's called Dandelion. So
yeah, Dandelion dance.
Dandelion. When I was in Dandelion, for it was my 15 years when I did that.
So probably at 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Sorry, we're probably at our 5 minutes.
Oh, that's okay. No, feel free to share. You're sharing some great great ideas, great experiences. Volunteering at a long-term care home is a really great idea. I wouldn't have thought of that, but yeah, they're always having like social events and, trying to, have some visitors come in and things like that. So certainly that's a really great one.
I
Yes.
think,
I wanna ask something for
yeah, go
mommy.
ahead, yeah.
To my biggest role model is my nana. My nana, she's living in the home care also. She was really sick. It was my mom's mom. She's really good, and she's also outgoing.
She was
She's
outgoing.
outgoing, she
Yeah, just
was
like
And
you.
she always do a lot of like actually like she made dinner for us. 'Cause we have a big family, it's crazy.
Her motto was, if you invite me, you better mean it because I will go. And I think Ashley lives by that motto as well. And I
Yeah.
think the other example that you gave was around cooking. And so Ashley and I go to a cooking class on Sundays that just celebrated its 10th year. So adults, well, we weren't adults when we started, or you weren't, but cooking class in the community. And it's been great to see everybody develop their cooking skills, but really bringing that back home. And when you mentioned about baking, Ashley's known as the neighborhood baker now of baking, and we need to send it out. So it's a great
Yes.
opportunity
I
for her.
always invite it to my next door neighbors
You take it to our neighbors.
because we have new members. They came from the Turkish and they told me we love your food.
That's right.
I think the cooking class too, it's specifically for Ashley and her peers. The menus are particularly chosen as healthy menus, and they're also simplified so that they're doable. So everything from reading right through to executing is done by Ashley and her team, and it's confidence building, and it's always a good
Yes.
Sunday afternoon meal.
Yes, and I always have confidence. I always do. I have no doubt in it. I love it. And I talk too much because I get really happy.
I think you're certainly correct that you are outgoing like your grandmother, but
Yes,
that is excellent
yeah.
though. You've shared some great experiences and it sounds like you have a very busy schedule. Sounds like you're a
Yes.
very busy person.
I'm excited for Christmas because this is my first Christmas without her.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we'll be fine.
We'll be fine again.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's a perfect example of try everything, see what you like, and perhaps there's a crossover between, going to your cooking class and baking amazing things and then dropping it off at your neighbor's house. So I love that.
Oh yeah. I do it. Sometimes I bake something with. I do have a sister.
Two sisters. Yeah.
Give other people a chance.
I'm doing it up. I do have two sisters. I have a younger sister and an older sister, but they are going away too without me, so now I'm sad.
Where are they going?
You can tell everybody.
Tell where they're going.
They are going to see Taylor Smith tomorrow.
Oh, they're going to Taylor Swift. They
Yeah,
got tickets. That's
yes,
exciting.
but not me. I am ready to go.
There's no bitterness there at all. I
Yeah.
can tell.
Right, I'm done.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Thank you all of you for sharing. That was excellent. And I think we have one more community member actually who has put his hand up and asked if he could also share. Joshua, if you're still with us, if you still like to share. I think he's just unmuting himself. Joshua, are you still there?
He's lost his audio connection.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I don't know if you have any comments you want to add, Laura, if you have anything you want to contribute as we're chatting a bit about these experiences. We'll give Joshua
No,
a second, but
it's always wonderful to hear everybody's experience. For those of you that know me a little bit, I too am a parent. Our son is 32, and it's very interesting to us who and what he knows and what it is that he likes, and how in many ways he's carved himself a niche, because I'm not that keen on wrestling, but he's found people that are, that he's able to connect with and speak to, and tells me at great length about the pros and cons of who and what and the history, and it just goes a little bit over my head.
well, luckily then he's found others who share his wrestling passion. So you're not going to Monday Night Raw.
No, no.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I think Joshua is having some technical difficulties. But thank you everyone for contributing and sharing this evening. It was a wonderful conversation. And we'll be sharing this recording with everyone tomorrow so that everyone can have a listen. Thank you very much.